So can everybody see that? Yeah? Okay, awesome. All right, so I want to keep this a very interactive session. If you guys have questions, don't wait till the end. Jump in, interrupt me, please. Um, but the things that I wanted to share today, let's see if I can get myself going here, is really a couple things. One, the Lean Business Canvas. This is something that I love as a tool as a small business owner, and even as now working for Warner Brothers Discovery Sports. I think it's really important, no matter what stage your business is in, your organization is in, to be able to articulate your business model and your go-to-market model on. If you can put it on one piece of paper, you understand your business. And a lot of times, the thought processes that it takes to get it on one piece of paper, there's a lot of discussions involved. But it also shows sometimes, oh man, here's an area where maybe we should double down a little bit harder. Maybe we're doing things maybe not as efficiently as possible. Like one area I always, kind of point to, having consulted small medium businesses before, is in the social media area. Are you doing as much as you should? Are you doing the right channels? Sometimes for the audience that you're trying to reach, you're not leveraging the right social media channels. So it's always a good time. These are always good exercises to kind of revisit your business model. And so what we're going to do today, the Lean Business Canvas, is really a one-page business plan. And we're going to step through each piece of it today. And it's, there's many schools of thoughts on the number of elements that you should focus on, but I add in a digital perspective because I just think it's needed. But you look at your customer pain points, you look at the offerings and services and solutions that you provide, your brand promise. Look at the competitive landscape. What's your competitive advantage? What are your target segments? Who are, everything is about partnerships and influencers these days, right? So, have you given thought to any partnerships or, some of the key influencers? When I was at IBM, at American Cancer Society, we had influencers that we used to help get our message out. From a social media standpoint, I think everybody needs to have a digital face now. When you think of raising money online, there's so many ways to do it where you can literally raise money if you make it easy off of the social media page. You can do it right off of Instagram. And so have you thought about those kinds of things? Channels, which routes to market are you using to get your message out there and also to get donations? And to sign up volunteers and keep volunteers engaged. What cost? So kind of really looking at the cost to your business model. Revenue streams. How are you going to make money? What are you doing today? Are there new streams of revenue that you could think about, right? And then, the age-old thing is, once you get your business up and going, no matter what stage you're in, how are you tracking success? And so we're going to talk about some key performance indicators as well. So this is, I was like, never fear. It may seem like many boxes, but it is not. All very easy. We're going to step through it. So, going to I'm looking at the traditional definition for, pain points, right? Going to Merriam-Webster's. It's that, persistent, nagging, recurring problem, right? A lot of times you'll see that you'll hear about a service or a solution is really based out of a customer need or something that was nagging you. And you say, you know what, here's a solution that helped me. I'm going to now, scale that and bring it to the marketplace because maybe everybody's having this problem, right? And I know I'll use a lot of Cancer Society references today, just, having worked there. I think it'll, make sense to everyone. But like when I think of the challenge of solving cancer, right? And actually just having a close relative go through that process, like I don't know anyone that hasn't been touched by cancer, right? And so having a close relative that's gone through that recently, everything that I learned at the Cancer Society and everything I ever heard about became true overnight. The panic that you feel when you hear about it, How can I help the person that I care about, right? How do I make sure that they have a cancer treatment plan that we can actually trust, or a team of doctors, right? Um, and so that's a customer pain point that's real. And so when I think of the Cancer Society's kind of value proposition, it's really around, the programs that they put on, the research and development, the R&D that they spend, to all in the name of helping hopefully one day eradicate us all of being touched by cancer. And in the unfortunate happenstance that someone you know or even ourselves get impacted by cancer, trying to make that journey a little bit more convenient, right? So, as far as services that are provided with rides to treatment or lodging services. And so, really thinking through the customer pain points that you're centered on, and hopefully, things that are differentiated services, right? So what are you offering? And, this many moons ago, my first job out of school was with Procter and Gamble. So many of you may know Tide and Crest, some of their top brands, right? Um, and they always talk about solving unmet needs. So sometimes I didn't even know I needed Tide, right? I didn't even know I needed sparkly teeth, right? Pantene's another brand. The shiny hair. They always do like the example in the commercial where they do the hair drop thing, where they show the, you know, the. I see you, Kim. Are you a Pantene user? Exactly, the hair drop, right? Where you see the shimmer of the hair. Um, all of those things, they're unmet needs that we didn't even know, right? That we needed. And then sometimes the thing that's also interesting in that unmet need department is sometimes you've heard of drugs now that they actually have prescribed for one illness that's also helpful for others having challenges in other areas, right? Sometimes there's I think there's a diabetes medication right now where one of the side effects is some extreme weight loss, right? And so now it's also being prescribed in some instances for people that need to lose, large amounts of weight fairly quickly. So thinking through your value prop and all the customer pain points. And then, some of the tools to identify the pain points that, we've been using at Warner Brothers Discovery, fairly, very recently. I know the OWN Network, for example. How many of us, Home and Garden TV, we all like to watch these channels. And so one of the reasons why we're so hooked is because we do a lot of research to try to figure out how to engage you and pull you in, right? So that qualitative research. Another thing that we can also do, maybe a follow-on if anyone's interested, is like a design thinking workshop. So I love those workshops. I used to conduct them when I was at IBM, which is basically, kind of thinking with the user in mind and then kind of designing your offering or your product or your service kind of around that, using a group of kind of would-be personas or customers to help you kind of build it out even more. Think through your channels and that kind of thing. So then let's go to the next box, which is really around your offerings and solutions. So what product or solution are you evaluating to potentially bring to market? If you're already in market, what solutions do you have? One thing that IBM is always guilty of, and many, even Procter and Gamble, having too many things to focus on, right? Do you have, too many services that you're spending money on? There's going to be a cost box down at the bottom, right, that we're going to talk about. And, so, man, right now in the Discovery, Warner Brothers Discovery business, we're looking at all the different programs because you had two companies that merged together. And so if you're merging organizations, I think there's one group that's merging organizations, Miles for cystic fibrosis, if Becky and Peter are on, right? So if you're merging organizations, one of the things you need to think about is, do we have too many solutions with the merged organizations, right? How much is it costing us to sustain all these programs as now that, one unified entity, right? And then as much as everyone doesn't like, to do it sometimes, we have to figure out a methodology, which is also something if you want to go through, there's a model that I use to actually go through the thought process of how do we, and at IBM, everyone wanted their product to go to market, right? And even at Procter & Gamble, everyone wants their product to go to market. If you can't afford everything, let's come up with some rationale for maybe it's a product revenue clip level. Maybe it's a usage clip level. You know, how many ride shares do we do annually, right? And there's a way to kind of look at it very empirically from a numbers perspective and kind of create a scorecard, if you will, to be able to very objectively or more objectively get to what your real solutions should be. And then also, you know, looking at those solutions again, do they address the main customer pain points for your industry, right? Are they differentiated versus what everyone else is offering? You know, I'm very biased, but the American Cancer Society, the R&D that they put into their research, you know, honestly, no disrespect to any of the other wonderful organizations, and you know, in the cancer space, we'll talk about this on the next slide. There's no competitors. You know, Susan G. Komen, I wish them well. You know, National Cancer Institute, if any one of these organizations solves cancer first, yay. You know, please put all of us out of business, you know, kind of thing. So, you know, in many spaces, homelessness and all of these things that we're all working to solve, there's, you know, you can say competitors, but like, you know, we're all working together, right? So, but at the same time, are the things that we're offering differentiated? From an American Cancer Society perspective, the programs that they offer, I feel are very differentiated. The research that they offer, very differentiated. You know, what's the brand promise? And this is something, you know, how are you positioning your brand? What's the value proposition? I put some of the mission statements up here, and I did some consumer brands that are my favorite. I give way too much money to Starbucks and Amazon. We won't even go there on annual spend, but I'm sure you guys are with me on some of these. But you know, I love the Starbucks. You know, I read the one of the president's books that were written about Starbucks and their business model. Absolutely love it. You know, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. They're really all about creating these experiences where people come together, very much like the Italian coffee shops. And then Amazon, I'm a big believer. Sometimes they screw up your order, but they always fix it, right? They're very customer centric. And so, you know, to me, these are two very good examples of, you know, being very succinct and to the point around the value proposition that you're centered on, and then really pushing out into the marketplace. And then, you know, I kind of shared some of, you know, the folks on the line. Hope you don't mind me sharing your value props, but I thought it was interesting just to, you know, kind of look at some of those. And then also, you know, this third point, you know, I'm really big from a consumer marketing standpoint since my early days were in Procter & Gamble. Some people say it's a blessing. Some people say it's a curse to have been, you know, kind of start your career at Procter & Gamble. Because I think from a brand standpoint, I'm forever affected. The reasons to believe, that's really, you know, how do you believe that Pantene makes your hair shiny, right? And they show you on the commercials the crystals and the technology behind the hair drop and the shimmer, right? Tide, they show you all the, you know, the technology sometimes on the commercial, actually whisking away the dirt. And a lot of the reasons why they do that is to give you reasons to believe that Tide really gets your clothes clean, right? Same thing from a toothpaste perspective. So, you know, as you think through your value proposition, you know, what are the things that you're sending out from a messaging, like those kind of key proof points underneath your mission statement of what you're doing to achieve your mission statement? What are those reasons to believe? So, like, kind of think through that as well. Any questions, comments? All right, I'm gonna keep zooming through. And so from a competitive advantage standpoint, you know, think through the competitive landscape. And, you know, again, in many of our spaces, are there really competitors? You know, we're all working together to solve the galactic, you know, challenges in society right now. But, you know, try to think about, you know, as much as you can, are the things that you're offering, your products and services, how they differentiated versus others in your space, right? And then are there substitutes for your product or services that people, may prefer more because of different terms and conditions or different, way it comes to market, right? Um, this is a tool, and actually I forgot to put this in the homework package, but I'll send out an update in case anyone's interested. This is like from business school, but basically it's just a way to like look at the market and your competitive landscape. And so I teach this in my class right now, and I teach an analytics class. So folks that are very numbers minded, but their first paper, I'm like forcing them to think from a market perspective, and then use numbers and to substantiate their beliefs on like why a certain market is competitive from a certain standpoint. So I'll use American Cancer Society as an example. We don't consider, again, competitors in this space, but Susan G. Komen is someone in that space, right? The National Cancer Institute, another, you can think of others. And then are there new entrants? And a lot of times, depending upon what your space is, the cost to entering a market is really expensive. To launching a new brand, really expensive. Depending upon, the big companies or organizations in that space, the American Cancer Societies, the Susan G. Komens, the National Cancer Institutes, it may be really hard to start a new nonprofit, but people do it, all the time. And then, you think about maybe there's something, I'll make it up, a new nonprofit that comes in around cervical cancer, right? And then what happens is maybe there's some new finding in the industry that, I think there's actually, several ties to products that people say, oh, talcum powder, or maybe it's some kind of hair, perm that's been given that has ties to like different types of cancer, right? And so maybe if there's an uptick in cervical cancer, all of a sudden, maybe what the American Cancer Society, totally making this up as an example, is not, maybe they don't go deep enough on the research or the offerings and services around cervical cancer, because at the end of the day they serve all the different types of cancer, so they can't go as deep maybe on cervical cancer as they can for breast cancer, right? So other organizations could pop up and become essentially a substitute because that's all they focus on, right? So you think through the model and say, well, who are potential substitutes that are new and upcoming in the marketplace? And then you look at, the bargaining power, and in this instance, buyers would really be like our consumers, and from an American Cancer Society, it'd be the people that are consuming the research and consuming the services. So, again, caregivers, actual cancer patients, family members, et cetera. It goes on, right? And then the suppliers could be the American Cancer Society itself, and then all the partners and downstream partners, right? There's folks that they will recommend for, wig, finding wigs if someone's lost their hair, or makeover services. They actually offer, some of that as part of their programs. Books, there's books that are for sale via like the thrift stores and things that they provide. So just think of like the various suppliers. I know there's third-party partnerships that they have, right, that we'll talk about. So like 1-800 Flowers, if you buy certain arrangements, American Cancer Society gets a kickback. I know that there are third-party suppliers like Apple. There was one entertainer that was impacted personally by cancer, and he ended up coming up with a song, and every time that song got downloaded, American Cancer Society got part of the download proceeds. So, just thinking through kind of the competitive landscape, and really this model is to identify where you might be vulnerable from a competitive standpoint. So just think through that. And then your target segments. Again, who are your primary customers? What do we know about them? Again, maybe do some qualitative or some quantitative research. What are the preferred ways to buy? Like the research, if you can, do that, or even find research maybe about a certain population. I'll take homelessness for example. There should be research out there that maybe organizations have done already, that you could get access to, that would maybe give you insight into preferred ways to reach people, right? And then, like I mentioned before, are there unintended customer sets? Are there, maybe folks you haven't even thought about yet that could benefit maybe from a different perspective from the same offerings and services that you provide for your original target customer set? And then channels. And the next couple slides kind of all flow together, but you know, channels are the means by which your product or your service actually gets to those target customers, right? It helps you get your word out in the marketplace. Hey, here's what American Cancer Society or whatever nonprofit's doing, right? Here's the products and services that we offer to help you in this space. And then it also provides a way for customers to learn. A lot of times you need to educate yourself. So I think the American Cancer Society product example, right, where the first thing people do, and there's like millions of people that come. I was always amazed at the number of people, that visitors. I was the digital analytics person that set up their entire dashboard of all the metrics around every aspect of digital. And I was always floored by the number of, like, the millions of people that come to the website every single month from both the US and all parts of the world, which I don't think they really knew the magnitude of the international customer set that they had before I started sharing like the website metrics, right? And we also use that data as we provided services. You have to make choices, right? We were actually in the middle of retooling the website. And so the web team came to me and said, well, what should we translate first? What languages should we translate? I'm like, well, okay, English definitely. But then also when you look at where the website traffic, Spanish second, then French, then German, so you had to give it a priority because we only had so much money to be able to translate things. So, you can use that web data for a lot of different things. I also used to use it to inform the research team, saying, okay, in the month of January, the top 3 searches are, I'm making it up, breast cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, whatever it is, right? But I would funnel that back to the research team to then help us figure out, okay, well, in the months of January, February, March, what should be the research topics that we major on the front page of the website. And so think about those types of things as well when you go to market. If you know that there's like a cyclical nature to your business, right? Maybe on your front page website, you serve that information up because people are looking for it in the months of January, February, March, or during giving season, right? October, November, December. Maybe put the donation buttons kind of front and center. Okay, I was like, get ready to admit that person myself. But yeah, so just thinking through all these things, and then the other thing that's great is the different types of channels. There's so many options out there for us today, right? So when you think of if you're having trouble with your website, there's different options for you now than there used to be. So now you can own your own website, right? But then there's also partner channels. So you can have websites off of Instagram and donation pages off of Instagram. So there's so many ways now to go to market between the own channels and the partner channels. So just thinking through that as well. And then as you think through your channels, also think about, and I'm gonna be a data nerd here for a second, but data is so important, right? It's we don't you don't necessarily think about it, and as a data nerd, I think data is really important. But the view to the customer, and then that single view of data. Like if you, and I know I'll use the American Cancer Society example, right? What's the face of your organization across all the channels, right? How do you present on the web versus social? Is your messaging coming through the same? Right now, if I were to go out to everyone's website, everyone's social channels, would the messaging be similar? If I were to sign up for an email communication off of your website, would the messaging mirror what would come through social? Would it mirror what would come from the website? The front office, when I call customer service, what happens? What's the reception? You know, does someone answer and say, "Hey, it's great to be, at American Cancer Society today," or what, like, what's the outward face to consumers or would-be volunteers that would call, right? External comms that go out, are they consistent in message, right? So just thinking through that, and then are you leveraging all the possible channels, right? If you're not ramped up on social media, maybe think about, okay, if we just did one new thing this year, maybe it's going on social media and really ramping up our presence. Another thing you have to think about is, are you doing too much? So there are examples where, and many of us are guilty of this, but like, if I were to go out to all of your social media channels right now, when was the last time you posted? And if the last post was 2020, 2021, maybe you're doing too much, because it's one of those things, like when they say, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, doesn't matter. So yeah, you're on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, but if your last post was in 2020 or 2021, is anybody paying attention? Like, if I go out there and see that, I'm like, man, they're not even updating this, right? So maybe use that as an opportunity to say, you know what, let's rethink our social strategy. Maybe let's just streamline. And the one that we're not using that often and there's no engagement on it, people aren't liking things, and, are people really engaging with it? Maybe save those energies and really double down on the channels that are getting frequent posts and are getting, engagement from your donors and volunteers, right? And then how are you leveraging your volunteer and donor data? This is like the new science here. And when you think about, and I use a real-time example, from American Cancer Society. I hope we've solved it by now. But keeping donor data up to date, right? So you have the unfortunate happenstance of someone's significant, like their loved one passing, and the donor records are not up to date. And the worst thing that could happen is if someone very well-meaning calls to, hey, don't you want to re-up your donation from last year, and mentions the person's name that has now passed on. Horrible experience, right? Horrible, painful experience, which is, a real-time example of why it's really important to keep the data up to date. And then also, having a great experience of, man, this person set up an anniversary of the person's passing. Maybe we, run a report that says, hey, who's celebrating anniversaries, do a timeline, and now we do a campaign around the anniversaries that runs all year long. And I reach out to this person to celebrate, to say, hey, we want to console you and be with you, in this milestone. And, and look at all the things that we've done throughout the year. If your loved one passed of lung cancer, whatever it is that we've done to try to solve, for this type of cancer. I mean, there's different things that you can do, but, there's ways, especially when you think of, in this world, we called it like the attention Olympics, right? So when you think about it, there are, and in the advertising world, you call it cut through, right? So how does my ad, and I'll even, the Pantene commercials, you could not have the volume on and see the hair drop and it's Pantene, right? And you're going to remember that it's Pantene, so like another thing I always try to do, the Super Bowl's happening, and after the Super Bowl commercials, do you remember who was the person that paid millions of dollars for a 30-second spot? If I don't remember that it was Doritos, in my mind, you might have wasted millions of dollars, right? Because like there's a reason why, you do to get during the Super Bowl dedicated time. You want that cut through. Very similarly in our businesses, there's an attention Olympics in this, especially October, November, December. Everybody's trying to get the same donation dollar, right? And when you think of the industry dynamics that we're all facing, which is, we're in inflationary times, right? People, everything costs more. Eggs, everything costs more. So people, I know, right? So people are cutting, tightening the belt. We're cutting, right? And so when you come to me this year, if you hit me at the wrong time, if you don't hit me with a right message, if you didn't remember that my husband just passed, whatever it is, I may go to St. Jude, or I may go to the other organization, because I only have really one set of dollars to donate, right? So it's, how does my message, how is it crisp enough, clear enough? Does it resonate enough to make my message cut through the sea of donation attempts in the months of October, November, and December, right? So can't express it enough. And a lot of times, the other thing that we talk about, and this picture kind of shows it here, is this is a picture, it's a very, kind of corporate or consumer example, traditional example of omni-channel marketing, where it's so great to use all the different channels with the same message at the same time. So now when I see American Cancer Society running commercials on television in October, November, December, and then I get the email, and then I get the hard copy, donation card in the mail every year that I put on the corner of my desk, so I make sure I remember to do it before December 31st. All of those things work in concert together, right? So that omni-channel kind of marketing, and my grandson or my nephew is participating in Relay for Life. So I have my, kind of in-person, on-the-ground events, and they, the student captains at universities. So like I'm hitting my grandmother up, I'm hitting my uncle, my aunts up, right? All of those things work in concert together to go after that donation dollar. Any questions or comments so far? All right. Is it tracking? All right.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the whole notion of understanding the macro environment, and it's not materially shifting who you are, but it is shifting your message to match not just what's happening in an individual donor's life, but also you spoke about the economy, things like that. I think that's very important to sort of resonate with that and try to shift in a way where the messaging is less about you and more about them, right? It's wrapped into what's going on with them.
Yeah. And then, as we drill down into the channels, like these next two slides just kind of do a little further. But, I'm really big on digital and social media. Like you got to have a plan. What are you doing? And again, I kind of drilled down on these somewhat already, but like, are you focusing on the right channel, social media channels? What are you doing to drive, create awareness? How are you delivering your services? Are there other ways that you could, going through internet, to really deliver services more than just like kind of the face to face? I think a lot of this was really kind of exacerbated really when you think of COVID. Like, who would have ever thunk, right, that COVID would have happened, and we would have had a pandemic. And I can only imagine for, I'll use American Cancer Society again as an example. Like, if you're doing rideshare, it probably turns rideshare on its ears, right, on its side, because now I'm worried about, whoever's I'm taking to treatment, keeping them safe, keeping the person that's driving safe. There's just so many different elements. And so I wonder, like, I wasn't there, the last few years, but I'm just as I think of it real time, like how much of a challenge that must have been to provide those types of services that were still needed, during COVID. But then how do you manage it, right? So if you only deliver services maybe through, one way, which is more of a, tactile, face to face, maybe in person events, are there things that you could deliver online to help people? Galvanizing volunteers. Nowadays, if you want to get the, Gen Z and the, all the millennials, like my sister, they're digital natives, right? So how do you? And I think I look at American Cancer Society's model, where they're super social. They run Relay for Life and making strides for breast cancer, like digitally. They get donations digitally, and the kids are really fired up to do it. I mean, amazing. And the engagement from existing volunteers, the ability to reach new volunteers through what they do in socials, amazing. And then also sharing the good stories, sharing the good news, right? Like, how are you communicating out? We talk about that on my Inspire Brands, foundation work, right? If people knew that because you bought an Arby's sandwich and $1 of your purchase was given to help cure, food insecurity, and you knew how many people you fed, maybe next time you're super hungry and you're trying to figure out where to go, you might go to Arby's, because that's going to stick in your head, right? So getting those good news stories out. And then again, when we get to like near the end where we're thinking of tracking KPIs, that maybe sharing good news stories, that's one of the KPIs that we track from a Inspire Brands Foundation perspective. Like, how many of those stories are we getting out, right? How many people are we feeding? Really trying to get the metrics around the impact of what the services that you're delivering. How many people have you actually served? So then when it's time to go to donors, you can say, hey, your funds last year served X number, helped us serve X number of people, right? And please re-up again this year. So partnerships and influencers, again, survival these days is all about partnerships. And it's either with brands, other brands, or with influencers, like, people that are well known. Maybe, again, you want to catch the, build relationship with the young, Gen Zers. A lot of times you get an influencer from Gen Z, from that era, from that generation, to really communicate through the tools, tweet out or go on Instagram, do a TikTok, right? Whatever that is, so that you can get your message out to the folks that you want to target, right? So, again, think through who could those key partners and influencers be. A lot of times we do a lot of work around social, even at Warner Brothers Discovery, to try to find influencers when they're cheap, right? So somebody that's right on the cusp of maybe really, kind of blowing up and getting bigger, and you try to catch them, and, in the sports world, you want to catch them when they're cheaper, right? Before they turn into a $10 million, $100 million Charles Barkley man, right? So you want to catch them way earlier than that. So, what can you do to raise awareness for your product, for your organization, and all the good things that you're doing? And then look at the type of partnerships. It could be a strategic alliance. And I actually, in the example that I did an example very high level that we'll go through around American Cancer Society. And, they have like many levels of partnerships and influencers that they use. So like they'll do strategic alliances with like the NFL and, Coaches for Cancer. And so they have those kind of alliances. But then they also have like kind of these joint ventures or, things that they'll do with like, eBay and Apple, like these partnerships where they actually also get a piece of the, proceeds, right? So look at the different, types of partnerships, co-opetition. We even do some of this in the media space where you kind of frenemies, right? So partner with people that would be likely competitors, but when it all comes to one goal of like cancer or whatever it is, maybe you open the nets up and invite everybody in for one common cause, right? So just think through those different models. And then the cost. So thinking about, what everything costs, and this might be the harder piece, but what does R&D cost? And again, doing that exercise of, if you're coming together, or even if you've been around a long time, IBM had a million products, being over 100 year old company, right? So once you think about that, you got to go through the process of streamlining, not only to save costs, but to be able to provide better services, right? Because maybe you're spending time on something where you could redeploy that time spent and volunteer time spent into another bigger initiative. The cost of services delivered, how do that rideshare program, how much does it cost to administer that? Feeding people, how much does it cost to administer that? Are there different ways? Can you get donations from other organizations to help offset the cost of meals that are delivered? Whatever that is, like thinking through that. And then being reasonable around salaries, right? And thinking through salaries. And also, sometimes, we do it many times on the corporate side of the coin, where sometimes you need to come down in headcount to right size the business to be able to do other things. So thinking through that as well. And then revenues, as nonprofit, donations are key, right? That's where you're getting your money. What are your other streams of revenue? Do you have thrift store proceeds? Are you selling books? Are you selling greeting cards? And you look at, those transactional things. So the books and the greeting cards, purchases at thrift stores and that kind of thing. And then the reoccurring revenue streams. Again, are there marketing campaigns that you can do to try to drive some of that reoccurring, revenue streams, right? Getting people annually, quarterly, monthly, anniversaries, and those kinds of things. Maybe you just do something with 1-800-Flowers where someone sends, puts a bouquet, to remember someone, like maybe at graveside, or I'm just, thinking off the top of my head, but like just examples of where things that you could do to create those additional revenue streams, and really thinking through that, right? And then these are just some, typical ones that you can think of, but selling assets, books and greeting cards, those kinds of things. Usage fees. So, charging a fee to use a certain product or service, a subscription fee. We love subscription fees, right? Because a lot of times there's a lot of research that says once someone sets up a subscription, especially with a credit card, how many times do you go to the end of the year and you say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I've been paying Amazon, or I can't believe I've been paying, my Adobe, a subscription, $35 a month," and I'm like, "Oh my God, like they got me," right? But we love subscription fees because a lot of times, for good reasons and not so good, like we're forgetful, we forget to cancel them. So lending and leasing and renting, I left those in there. Maybe there's a nonprofit that has plots of land, or who knows. Or maybe you have a workspace where people can, rent those workspaces out. I know my dad's church does that. Licensing, maybe less so here, but, wanted you to see all the options. Brokerage fees, being that go-between. And, American Cancer Society doesn't necessarily charge a fee for this, but they do act as a broker a lot of the times. If there are people that have been impacted to the point where you've gone through radiation or chemotherapy and you lost your hair, they'll, naturally are the go-betweens to just make sure people get access to the resources of, like, here's where I can get services to buy wigs that, will look natural and those kinds of things. Or there's organizations where people donate wigs, and, they clean them and refurbish them, and offer it as a service, as a nonprofit, to those needing them. And then, maybe using your site to advertise. I know if you go and look at the American Cancer Society site, they actually have a sponsors page. And those sponsors, again, there's ones that are corporate sponsors that basically, kind of pay to be, in partnership. And one of the things that they receive for that sponsorship fee is being featured on the sponsorship page. So that could be a source of revenue if you're not doing it now. Go look for some sponsors and create a sponsorship page, right? So think through that. And then, Once we have figured out our business model, new, existing, you've been around for a minute, you're merging businesses, whatever your status is, we have to figure out a way to track our progress, and kind of measure ourselves. And so, thinking through what are those key metrics. Revenue is obvious, right? I put some product roadmap. You know, that's more of a corporate example, but website visitors, year-to-year growth. Is there tracking, digging down in those website numbers? Do you want to grow a certain part of the world or a certain part of the U.S.? Do you want to try to increase the revenue? If you get a lot of your revenue from the Northeast part of the U.S., maybe try to grow that by doing more events or campaigns in certain regions of the country. Or if there's regions where you're light, maybe if you're light on the West Coast and you're not driving as much revenue as you are in another part of the country, maybe look at the tactics that you're doing in the regions of the country that are doing well and try to replicate that to the regions that are maybe not as driving, as many donations for you. And then what I also wanted to share was an example. So this is, just kind of a basic example, but, the key metrics, and you can really, based on your mission statement, what's important to the business, you can do this at a couple different levels. So I'll use the Inspire Brands Foundation, since we just did a balanced scorecard for my board work there. We pretty much, I'm like looking at these. Let me just move my box here so I can see. So we look at internal processes. We look at not necessarily learning and growth, but we look at external comms. So really driving those news stories. Definitely the financial metrics. And then we have metrics that we track by each one of the individual foundations that make up the larger Inspire Brands Foundation. And so we kind of have a top level sheet that we do, and then we actually have an individual sheet that looks at those same, kind of metrics for each one of the individual brands. And then we do kind of a roll up of that to the main balance scorecard kind of summary sheet. But this is just an example of, kind of a standard sheet based on, if you have a mission statement, maybe like a strategy doc, if there's anything that's been articulated around, hey, here's key metrics that are important to the business, then you think through what data sources do I have that can tell me how I'm doing financially, how I'm doing with, serving, your customer, right? And think through each one of those metrics. Maybe you do something around awareness and communications. And so think about your website, maybe it's number of web visitors and that kind of thing. So you can, adjust the metrics here, but a lot of the times the metrics also is dependent upon the data that you have access to, right? So, then it becomes important, like with the Inspire Brands Foundation, where we meet with the executive director of the board and his ops person and really went through a deep dive. Okay, what data exists? Are we, crazy here, wanting to track this one metric if there's no way to really track it? Like there's no data to really, help us track it. And so getting with them to really get a sense of, what data do you have consistent access to where you can really make this a meaningful means of tracking how you're doing. And so here's the example, very high level, but customer pain points, I mentioned some of these earlier, right? So finding credible cancer research, getting cancer treatment, a treatment plan, and a team of doctors that you trust, right? Understanding cancer treatment, medications, etc., like all the things that, and the side effects of medications and all of that. And then all the cancer support that goes with it, financial support, rides of treatment. And so those are just a few of the many customer pain points that we all try to serve from a cancer nonprofit perspective, right? And then some of the offerings, right? So ride to treatment programs, lodging during treatment, kind of the walkathons, and in the thrift stores. I mean, there's so many more things. The brand promise, ending cancer as we know it for everyone. Um, Competitive, advantage. I really look at, the competitors. Again, there's no competitor in this space, but Susan G. Komen, National Cancer Institute are two of the larger ones that they kind of always look to and benchmark against. Some of the things that I think where the Cancer Society really stands out is from an R&D perspective, the amount of money that they spend on research and development, and then just the fundraising is amazing that they're able to do, as well as the programs that they put out. And then, just hearing feedback from the programs, from actual people that have used the services is amazing. And then the target segments, I mean, I can't even say it enough. Cancer sucks, right? So like it just everyone is impacted by cancer, right? So it's the patients, it's the caregivers, it's the family, and all the people that are in the ecosystem, the nurses, the doctors, all the people that educate on different aspects of cancer. Um, the channels, again, e-commerce store. If you go on American Cancer Society site, and I just kind of did a quick, view to kind of see what they have out there. But there's an e-commerce store where you can buy T-shirts that tie into their walks. I know they used to have a thrift stores in several locations where they sold things to raise money. Social, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So again, I was kind of surprised they didn't have LinkedIn, for the business community. That's something with being such a large organization that's well known, that has all these, kind of corporate sponsorships. Surprised that they're not on LinkedIn, but the social team's super talented, so I'm sure there's a reason why they're not on LinkedIn, right? Or why they're not publicizing it, at least on the website. And then partnerships with Apple and eBay, and others. So like thinking, 1-800-Flowers, thinking through those, and then their influencer relationships. And then kind of drilling down into that, digital and social, web, e-commerce, all the, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And then when you look at their partnerships, right? And these are just a few. If you go out and look at their sponsorship page, there's many more companies that I just couldn't include all here, but just a few of them. The NFL, Bank of America, Genentech, Bristol Myers Squibb. So a lot of the, pharmaceutical companies, right? Makes sense for them to, be in business with those, in partnership with those companies, right? The e-commerce partnerships where they're getting a kickback. And then the influencers. Normani Corday, she's with a group called Fifth Harmony. And she's been, man, like I was there in 2016, 2017. And so they had just signed her in that time frame to be one of the influencers. I also know, I don't know if you guys know this, I'll date myself, LL Cool J, maybe. He was on the Grammys, so maybe it might be top of mind for many. They used to have an influencer arrangement with his wife, who had been, touched by cancer, and so she would do like signature jewelry, and then she would, kind of endorse the jewelry line through her social channels, through his social channels. And once a year they'd always do like kind of around donation time and giving time, October, November, December, would really do it, double down and do more in social and kind of online and different events with her, to create more awareness. And of course, LL would always be in tow, so they always get like kind of that halo from his following as well. Um, and then these last few boxes here, if you look at the cost, just the cost to administer all the things that you do, right? And then, looking at employee salaries. And I know, American Cancer Society was always looking at that. I know when I was there was a little bit of a hullabaloo around, they were paying people a lot of money. And so, they kind of had to right size some of that, which is always painful, but, it happens, right? And then revenue streams, how are you getting money in? So events, online donations, through web, through the volunteer-led campaigns that they do with Relay for Society or Relay for Life, and for making strides for breast cancer. Honestly, the things that they do online, it's probably some of the best stuff that I've seen. I mean, as far as the use of social to drive money and engage volunteers, it's leadership. And so if you can just start thinking about how you do that, they make a ton of money online, um, every single year through the campaigns. And then, the e-commerce, streams of revenue that you get via your own website, your own e-commerce store, and then the third-party partnerships, as well as, I don't know about you guys, but Instagram, it's a blessing and a curse. Like the ability to give money, buy things off of social media is just, it's a blessing and a curse. I spend way too much money being targeted on Instagram. So, for all of us, that's a great thing to go do, right? And then, key performance indicators, each one of us have to think through this for ourselves, but, revenue's obvious, website visitors, etc., right? And I think that is it.